Jesse Owens breaks 4 world records in 45 minutes. Oscar Wilde sentenced to 2 years for gross indecency. The most shocking events that happened on May 25th. In 1935, it was a day like any other until Jesse Owens stepped onto the track at the Belmont Park in New York. Within 45 minutes, he shattered 4 world records. The first was in the 100 meters. He ran so fast that nobody had ever come close to his time before, or ever since. Next up was the long jump. Again, he broke the world record. So far, so good. But then he did something that shocked everyone. He decided to run the 200 meters. At this point, people were getting worried because he had already broken 2 world records, and it was looking likely he would do a third. And just as they feared, he managed to complete the 200 meters faster than anyone in history. But still, he wasn't done. In an astonishing finale, he anchored his team to victory in the 4x100-meter relay, breaking another world record in the process. No one could believe what they were seeing. 4 world records smashed in less than half an hour. But how did this incredible feat happen? Well, some say it was down to pure athleticism. Others claimed it was down to the shoes he was wearing. But regardless of the reason, it shocked the world. It wasn't supposed to be possible to break 4 world records in one competition, let alone within 45 minutes. Number 6. Oscar Wilde sentenced to 2 years for gross indecency. When Lord Alfred Douglas met Oscar Wilde, he knew he had found the man he wanted to spend the rest of his life with. But there was a problem. Back in 1895, homosexuality was illegal in Britain, and society would never accept their relationship. But the couple didn't care about what people thought. They got married in a secret ceremony and moved to France, where they lived openly as a married couple. However, their blissful life together was soon shattered when Wilde's former lover came forward with accusations. It was enough to convince the police to bring charges against him. When they raided his home, they didn't find anything incriminating. But without hard evidence, they took his word against theirs. It was a hung jury that allowed the prosecution to keep bringing forward new evidence until finally, after 3 trials, he was convicted of gross indecency. He was sentenced to 2 years hard labor, which was actually meant as a euphemism for prison. But the judge added the hard labor part just to make sure everyone understood where he was going. Number 5. May Revolution. By 1810, Spain had been ruled by Napoleon for many years. The people of Madrid had had enough, but they needed a catalyst to rise up. It came unexpectedly when French troops arrived in the city to force the viceroy to surrender. What they didn't know was that the people of Madrid were planning something of their own. On May 2nd, they rose up and chased the French soldiers out of the city, and that same day they expelled the viceroy from Spain. As if by magic, the Napoleonic Wars suddenly became a lot less appealing, but sadly, that was only the beginning. While Madrid enjoyed their brief moment of freedom, the rest of Spain continued to suffer under Napoleon's rule for several more years. 4. Sierra Leone coup. For 11 years, Ahmadinejad Kabbah had served as the president of Sierra Leone. Under his leadership, the country had become one of the biggest exporters of diamonds in the world. It made him a very rich man. But not everyone was happy. Some people felt he had stolen their diamonds and hidden them away somewhere. They wanted revenge. On May 25, 1997, they launched a coup and ousted President Kabbah from power. Soldiers loyal to him fought back, but they were no match for the opposition. Soon, the entire country was in chaos. It was almost like a civil war, except it wasn't. It was a full-blown coup. After seizing power, they gave the country's diamonds to the Revolutionary United Front, who sold them on the black market for weapons. They used those weapons to continue fighting against the government, and eventually they won. The leader of the coup became the new president, and the country descended into even more chaos and poverty. Number 3. SpaceX Dragon docks with ISS. SpaceX Dragon docked with the International Space Station on May 25, 2012. It was a big deal because it marked the first time a commercial spacecraft had successfully reached orbit around Earth. This achievement was significant for several reasons. First, it demonstrated that private companies could compete with government agencies in the field of space exploration. NASA had always been the main driver of space exploration in the United States, but its budget was constantly being cut. In order to save money, NASA had to rely on public-private partnerships. SpaceX was the first company to take up the challenge, and it showed that commercial companies could provide the same level of service as NASA at a lower cost. Second, it proved that reusable rockets were possible. The Dragon capsule was designed to be recovered and reused, unlike the disposable rockets that had been used up until that point. This innovation reduced the cost of launches significantly and opened up new possibilities for space exploration. Finally, it represented a new era in space exploration. Up until that point, space travel had been limited to a few highly trained astronauts. But the success of the Dragon mission showed that it was possible to develop spacecraft that were accessible to a wider range of people. This could potentially lead to a future where space travel becomes commonplace. Number 2, to catch a thief. Sometimes the truth really is stranger than fiction. Take the case of Carl Panzram, for example. He was a notorious criminal who confessed to over 13 murders, but he claimed he had committed many more that he hadn't been caught for. His last victim was a young mother named Lillian Bankin. When the police searched his house, they found blood on the floor and walls, as well as some personal belongings of the victim. However, they couldn't find her body anywhere. Panzram led them to believe that he had thrown the body into the river, but they couldn't find anything there either. Days turned into weeks, and still there was no sign of the missing body. Just when the case seemed to be going cold, a fisherman spotted something strange in the river. It looked like a human hand. When the police divers retrieved it from the water, they realized it belonged to the missing victim. With the discovery of the body, Panzram was convicted of murder and sentenced to death. As his execution date approached, he became increasingly agitated. In a final act of defiance, he tried to escape from prison, but he was caught and returned to his cell. On May 25, 1934, Panzram was taken to the electric chair. As the current surged through his body, he looked at the warden and said, "I never killed that woman." Then he was dead. Number 1. The Great Emu War. It was the year 1932, and the Australian town of Campion was in the middle of a severe drought. The crops were failing and the animals were dying. But there was one thing that wasn't affected by the drought: the emus. There must have been thousands of them, and they were eating everything in sight. By the time the military arrived, the emus had already destroyed $10 million worth of crops. So they had to do something. Major Meredith was put in charge of rounding up the birds and driving them away from the farmland. He had 2 Lewis guns mounted on a Fordson tractor, but the emus kept coming back. So he ordered his men to open fire. For days, they battled with the birds, and neither side would give up. The military had underestimated the emus. They were fast, agile, and had excellent eyesight. Plus, they were able to fly, which made them almost impossible to hit. In the end, the military was forced to retreat. The Great Emu War had ended in a stalemate, and the farmers were left to pick up the pieces. So why do you think the emus won? Let me know in the comments. That's all for today. Subscribe if you haven't already, and thanks for watching.